Hey, this is Chris Olkowski, and I'm going to be talking about 4 steps to help you in being single without being anxious or lonely or just tied up in all these negative emotions when it comes to being single. Okay, I'm going to start out with step number 1, and that is being single is biblically good. Okay, now society, even the church, sometimes can get wrapped up in thinking that, well, you know, the Bible says that man isn't supposed to be alone, and it's not good that Adam was alone, but people forget that it was only Adam. Okay, and also the Bible also says that we're not supposed to forsake the fellowship of each other as Christians, and that's meaning that you're not supposed to be alone. Okay, and also it's talking about Jesus talking about how we're supposed to be one. He prays for it, Christians to be one as He is one with the Father. Okay, so again, meaning that as Christians, we're supposed to be as one, like almost as close as marriage, but not as much, but just as almost as much. That's why being single is not a bad thing. And actually, Paul talks about it in 1 Corinthians 7. It says, "An unmarried man is concerned about the Lord's affairs, how he can please the Lord." And then a woman also is an unmarried woman is mostly concerned about pleasing the Lord. Okay, and that's a good thing. He says that he wishes that everybody could remain single, but it's a calling. It's something that God called you to. And if you are single right now, he talks about this later on that it's better to stay single. It's better to stay single. I tell a lot of people that are single that you're better off being single than in a bad marriage. Because if you rush into being married to somebody, or you're not thinking, or you're not being prayerful about who you're bonding with physically or emotionally or whatever, and it goes towards marriage, it's the chance of you getting a marriage that's not going to be healthy is a lot higher. Okay, and that's the challenge. That's the danger of getting married without really being thoughtful and prayerful about it. And especially if you're not comfortable in your singleness, that's going to cause a lot of issues because you're listening to your flesh, and your flesh is desiring things, and you're desiring relationship, and wants to be loved, and wants to love somebody, and I mean, there's all kinds of things that are going on, and you want to get right with the Lord on that. And the first step is being single is biblically good. Okay, it's just the first start, just realizing that. And maybe you need to ask God to help you believe that. And that's the first step. Ask God, God, help me to realize that this is a good thing. So I'm hearing people say, "Oh, you'll be married someday," and "Oh, who have you been seeing lately?" It's all about relationships and being married and having a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and it's like, no, no, that's not the most important thing. Most important thing is being with the Lord, being bound with the Lord. It's that's why Paul says is that an unmarried man or woman is concerned about the Lord's affairs. That's a good thing. That they're set on Lord, pleasing the Lord, and they can be bonding with Him strongly. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. You want that. You want that before you get married. You want a strong bond as strong as possible before you get married. Okay. Um, and also it talks about there's undivided devotion to the Lord. Because when you're married, then you have this pull towards this other person and pleasing that person, which isn't a bad thing. But I mean, you're not only trying to get yourself to the Lord. Now you have you're bonded to this other person, and you have to help them to draw them to the Lord too. And it can be a challenge because now you're trying to you're trying to help yourself and help the other person, and that's just an obvious challenge. Okay, and there's that involved. Even if you're both strong Christians, that's it's harder to do that than being single. That's why being single is a good thing. Okay, not to say that marriage is a bad thing. It's just that making sure that you realize that being single is a good thing. Second is refrain from strong bonding. Oh, I said put binding in there. Strong bonding outside of marriage. Okay. Now, I'm gonna probably get flack for some of this, but since I've been a Christian, this has always been something I've believed in, and I believe it 10 times more, knowing more of the Bible. And that is because when I started praying about this and before this live, I started realizing that this is true. Is that even kissing, and a lot with a person, is causes bonding. And I know that's a challenge for some people, or actually for a lot of people, not probably 100%, or at least 99% of the people in our society, even the Christians, because everybody thinks, well, what's the big deal? You kiss a person, it's hardly anything. Okay, yeah, if it's a small kiss, but it's not healthy because just look at the way things they used to do things in the Jewish culture. Is that first they realized that if you're going to get close to a person, the people two people have to decide if they're even going to get married or not. They didn't even hardly date. They just spent saw the other person and had a desire for that person away from each other, not even physically, just looking at each other. That's it. That was it. You didn't bond emotionally, nothing. There's a reason for that. The reason is because you don't want bonding before it's time. Because if you start bonding emotionally or physically or anything with a person before marriage and creates a bond, and then you don't get married, it bringing it apart breaks a bond and causes problems. And specifically when it comes to opposite sex, that's why it's so important to be careful when you're even doing bonding with the opposite sex, with a brother or sister in the Lord. You just got to be careful. That's not saying it's bad. Just you be careful, guarding your heart. Okay, a good way to say this is and recognize this is if your desires for the other person is going beyond the relationship you're having. So let's say you're talking to this person, you're close to this person, and but all of a sudden you start thinking this person outside the relationship. You start thinking about being with this person more often. Or another good indication that the spouse of that person, let's say they're married, you kind of, envy that person or are mad at that person for whatever reason. And you don't even know why. These are red flags to remember when you're single, that you should probably step back from that relationship and say, I'm probably getting bonded too much from this person. Okay, and be honest with yourself. Talk to a few people, maybe even to free yourself up, so you're being accountable with somebody. You don't necessarily have to talk to that person about it, unless you feel that you're close to that person. Because sometimes you do it to a person, even like a pastor or something, and they have no idea. But if you're close to that person and they might have the same feelings you do, I mean, they might be like feeling drawn to your relationship and they say, I'm feeling we're getting too close. I know for me, so I'm just gonna step away for a while so you understand what I'm doing. And they probably saying, yeah, I feel it too. I'm glad you said something because I was probably feeling the same thing. And that's good because then you both know. And then you might even be able to bring that relationship back together, and you're aware. That's the first probably thing you're going to be thinking about is the conversation that you had, and then you're both protective, and it guards you both, and your relationship actually is healthy, and because of the fact that now you're both guarded, you're both protected, and you're both aware of the dangers of what that relationship could bring if it's done outside of God. And you can even have a strong relationship then because knowing that you're guarded. Not to say that you can go back then, because always being aware of these feelings that are going on, or thoughts or whatever outside of the relationship. Even in the midst of it to some degree, but especially if it's outside of the relationship. When you're not involved with the person at that moment. Um, so, like I said, refrain from strong bonding outside of the marriage. And so, like I said, because I've bonding like that and then breaking it is a bad thing. Um, I know, like I said, it's challenging. Now, another thing about this, and this is where it's going to be challenging, that's why you have such problems with teenagers, is because our society has allowed teenagers to go out together. Okay? Why that's so dangerous. And I knew this as a young Christian because I remember getting involved with a teenager when I was in my 20s. And I said specifically, I said, don't get involved with a girl. Don't, it's not worth it. Dating is fine, do things together, everything, but don't say you're going to go out. I mean, like you're going together. What it is creating an atmosphere that you're saying, now we can start bonding. You can start kissing. You can start getting emotionally attached, like you're a couple. That is never meant, it was never meant to be. It was never meant to be that way. I know that people are thinking I'm crazy when I'm saying this, but that's why you have problems physically when you're a teenager, especially when hormones are going around and everything. You start creating that bonding with the hormones that are going on. No wonder people are having a hard time. I mean, if you don't have the bonding going on and you just have the hormones, then it's a lot more easy. It's a lot easier to just say, okay, this is my hormones. I'm having feelings and everything, but I can still get the Lord. And you can talk your teenager down, saying, "Mom and Dad, I'm feeling so attached to, I want to be with a girl." Blah, blah, blah. It's like I understand that. That's healthy. That's a good thing. That means that you're like I said, you're a healthy person, and that's something that you can give to the Lord and draw to the Lord and that God can fill you in those things because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to bond. God wants to bond with that person in the midst of that. Okay, when you have these feelings, He wants to feel those feelings and feel fulfilled in that because part of those feelings isn't necessarily just because you wanting to be involved with the opposite sex. Part of it is just that you're feeling lonely or you're feeling that you need somebody to bond with. Well, you're supposed to bond with Christ. That's the whole point. And you could tell your teenager that. It's like, why am I feeling this way? Because you were meant to bond with Jesus Christ. You were meant to bond with God. That's why you're feeling so strongly about this. They might, it's still their choice. They still have a choice to believe it or not believe it or whatever, but at least they are aware of why they're feeling so strongly. And, just keep praying for them and help them in that. And so that they can, they can start asking God, to help them and draw as much as possible to Christ in it. And that hopefully maybe they can, get, have a relationship with Jesus Christ and get saved or at least get understand where it's all about and how God is trying to help them and God is trying to reach them in this. Okay, that He loves them and they're going to struggle until they get to the Lord in this, and they're going to struggle even when they get involved with a woman or a man. That when they get with the opposite sex, because the thing is that opposite sex, once those bonds form, it's going to even be harder. I mean, I've experienced it. I think everybody's experienced it to some degree. Is that feeling of when you bond and you break up? I mean, that first time when you really bond, you break up. Oh my gosh! I mean, I remember it specifically, and I never realized why I had such a pull to that person. It's because I created this bond, and the first time you bond like that, that's the most deep one you're going to have probably because once you break that bond and you don't you try to bond with somebody else, it's not as strong, it's not as binding because now it's broken. That bondage, those feelings and the emotional and all the physical and I talk about this in the marriage video, in another video, but all those bonding elements that are in a relationship like that with the opposite sex are broken, and so now it's not going to be as strong, like I said. So make sure that you refrain from that as much as possible. As a teenager, if you have teenagers, or if as an adult, or any time, even if you're we're divorced and now you're single again. This is very important. Third, bring any feelings of loneliness or other deep desires to the Lord. Bring it to the Lord. That's what it's like I said before, is that with teenagers, adults, with all of us, when we're single, it's meant to be our desires are meant to be to the Lord. It's to bond to the Lord. It's not about the fact that you're feeling lonely because you're not having other people. That's a lie. That is a lie. And I've been single twice because I got divorced. And after being divorced, I realize now, being stronger in the Lord and realizing what this is all, why singleness is the way it is because of the fact that Satan tries to lie to us. He lies by saying that you should be with somebody. You need to be with somebody. That's a lie. You do not. You have to have you have to have fellowship. You need to be in a body of believers. Yes, and God will supply that outside of marriage. He needs to, and he promises to. Even when in the Old Testament, when Ezekiel says, he felt so alone, he brought Elisha with him, and they connected and they bonded. Jonathan and David were together, and they bonded strongly. Okay, but does not mean that you have to have marriage or you have to have the opposite sex involved with you. Okay, I think it's important to have relationships of the same sex and the opposite sex in terms of fellowship. It's important to have both because it grows you as a person. I mean, now you can, I've had many people that of the women that have talked into my life, old, young, and all kinds, and then it's been a good thing if it's healthy, if it's not bonding outside of marriage. And most of the time it wasn't because of the fact that I knew enough that was important to to be stronger in the Lord more than anything else. But I didn't realize one thing is that not realizing that marriage, being single, was good, and so I was pulled into marriage, and I wasn't thinking straightly, and nobody kind of told me that. I think if I would have known that this is important to be single and how that is a good thing, and to really cherish it and really bond with Christ during it, it would have helped me. And also this third step of bringing these feelings of loneliness to the Lord, so He can fill me in it, so He can touch me in it, and then it's a good thing. It's good to feel lonely, so He can fill you in that. That's the whole point of being lonely or about feeling, so He can fill you in it. Okay, and if you're having a hard time, to cry out to the Lord and say, God, why am I still feeling lonely? Why is it still in there? Because there's probably something that's blocking you. And if you need help, I always tell on my videos, I says, to have the, use the comment section in this YouTube video or in on my Facebook page, and we'll get it, in Messenger, message us so that me and Kristen can walk through with you what might be going on, because there might be past relationships that you need to be healed from. There might be situations that you may be healed from. There's all kinds of things that cause dysfunction in ourselves that can create this. Okay, it's not because you're not with the opposite sex. That's a lie. Okay, I'll tell you right straight out, because God has many times. Oh, even Jesus said it. I'll even share another scripture. Let's see. It's Matthew 19:8. Jesus is replying to some people are saying, well, what about divorce? Are we supposed to divorce people? He says only if you're not supposed to divorce your wife or husband except for sexual immorality or adultery. Okay, and the disciples answer, well, if this is the situation, if this is the only reason why you can get divorced, it's better not to marry. They're realizing, like, wow, you just can't divorce anybody. I mean, it's so funny because back then, men, which was not godly, was never meant to be this way, because even Jesus said that God allowed people to divorce because they were so hardened in their hearts, and He really didn't. That was never meant to be. And that once they realized that divorce is not good, it's a sin. Okay, that they says, well, it's better not to marry. And Jesus said, not everyone can accept this word, but only those to whom it has been given. Okay, because He goes into that people choose to be with God when they're single. And that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to choose God. Okay? And that's the whole point. As Jesus is saying that if you're single and you're being single, you choose God. If you do not choose God, you're going to be you're going to have all these feelings, and you're going to have a hard time in your life because of the fact that you're not meant to be alone. Okay, you're not. You're supposed to be bonded to the Lord for one, and then have fellowship. If you're not having those things, definitely you're going to be lonely. If you're in your flesh and you're not in a fellowship, you're going to feel lonely. But if you're bonding with Christ and you're in fellowship, that loneliness feeling gets filled up by the Lord and through other people. And that's how it's supposed to work. This is biblical. This is what God is saying, is that it's a hard word, but only those whom it has been given are able to accept it. So you, as a child of God, as a strong Christian, have to receive this truth from God that is biblically good. And then you have to receive, God, help me see that. And then receive it and be filled with it and understand that this is a good thing. And that my loneliness is only so that God can fill it. Okay? And the last step is you are meant for God alone and aren't to bond strongly with anyone outside of marriage. Nope. Outside of marriage, you weren't meant to bond with anybody else. That's why I said you're meant to bond with the Lord. And that's what it's all about. So when you're having these feelings of loneliness and in these deep desires, we go to the Lord. And then we get him filled by the Lord. And that's what it's meant to be. That was always what it was always meant to be. That's why in the Garden of Eden, it was meant, the whole thing was they had this relationship with God, and then they had each other. When they ate of the apple of good and evil, the apple of tree of good and evil, they were separated from God, and then they hid themselves, and they covered themselves because they felt guilty, and they didn't feel comfortable around each other. See how that works? See, and then they're also, I'm sure they felt alone. They felt afraid because now they didn't have this protection. Now they didn't have this fellowship with God, and there was enmity now between the woman and the wife, and the wife and the husband. Okay, that could only be rectified and brought back to healthiness by the Lord, because that's how it's supposed to be. That was how it was meant to be, is to be to the Lord first, and then you bond. But if you don't have the Lord, marriage, that's why marriage is so tough, is because we're not drawing to the Lord in it. Now, it can be tough, like I said, with other reasons, because there's brokenness and everything else. But when me and my wife are in the Lord, oh, it's the most amazing thing ever. I'm telling you, I haven't been so happy in all my life because I have such a godly wife. I am not kidding. This is heaven on earth. I am telling you. But I mean, not that we don't have struggles. We have lots of struggles. But it is so fulfilling to have a godly wife, and I'm seeking God, and then we bond together with the Lord, and it is amazing. Because we're both helping each other, and we're bonding the Lord, and we're growing together in the Lord, and we're getting revelation together, and we're be passionate together in the Lord, and it's so awesome. But it's because we're both going to the Lord. Okay? But if you're not, but the first thing, if you're single, go to the Lord, and that's where we're supposed to be filled. That's what it's supposed to all be about. Do not get in thinking that marriage is the answer, because if you go in there thinking that the answer is marriage, and it's very possible, and God might even have it orchestrated this way, that you end up in a bad marriage, so you realize that the Lord is first. It's probably what God was showing me, because I was in a marriage and ended up being bad marriage, and then I ended up in divorce. And God taught me something. He's first. That's what he wanted to teach me. And I wish I would have known that before this, and then it's very possible I could have been, my first marriage would have been a better marriage, because I would have been in the Lord first, and realizing that he's the answer and not marriage. Okay? So that's why the 4 steps are so important. Being single is biblically good, and it's important to believe that and know that. Refrain from strong bonding outside of marriage. That includes strong kissing. Sorry. I mean, if you want to go against it, that's fine. I mean, that's your choice. But I'm just telling you, this is biblical. And it's what the Jews used to do. Okay? And there's a reason for these things. Third, bring any feelings of loneliness or other deep desires to the Lord. Okay? So if you have strong desires or you're feeling lonely or frustrated or whatever, you bring them to the Lord. And then fourthly, you're meant for God alone and aren't to bond strongly with anyone outside of marriage. You're supposed to bond to the Lord. So instead of reaching out to these people and trying to get all this bonding from people, get to the Lord first and just be filled with the Lord. Then any kind of outside of fellowship you need will be healthy. Like I said, then you're going to be able to be healthy with the opposite sex, and you're going to be able to get good fellowship and connection and everything, and get filled which through fellowship in a healthy way. And you're not going to be pulling on them unnecessarily because you're trying to get this bonding going on. Okay, there'll be a healthy kind of bonding, a bonding that's supposed to be brotherly and sisterly, not strongly bonding like we're supposed to be with the Lord and with somebody that you're married to. Okay? And that kind of strong bonding is only for the Lord and in marriage. That's why marriage is a reflection of our bond with Christ, because it's that strong. Okay? So those are the 4 steps, and pray that God can help you in it, because some of this is hard teaching. Even God said this, it's a hard teaching. And so I think that's where we fail as Christians and as the church, is to not realize how important this is. Okay, God bless.